two broad verticals in B2B distribution, accounting for 60% of all startup investing and M&A activity in the past 5 years. We've got some further analysis on actually, where did all the tech startup investing and M&A activity come from? How do we get the rest of B2B distribution to really lean in like these two verticals? B2B distribution, largest industry in the United States, $8 trillion in size according to the US Census Bureau. What is the logistics, the 3PL and the trucking industry? It's sub 1.5 trillion. So 8 trillion B2B distribution, sub 1.5 trillion between logistics and trucking. US automotive, right? Selling cars, kind of a big industry, like 1.2, 1.3 trillion, right? B2B distribution is massive. A month ago on our B2B newsletter, we covered, so what kind of tech startup investing and tech startup M&A are the incumbent large B2B distributors partaking in, right? Just in the past few weeks, Amazon launched $1 billion VC fund. Home Depot launched a $150 million VC fund. Manufacturers, right, who the distributors are buying from, are investing in digital disruptors who would be regarded as direct competitors to distributors, right? So manufacturers are trying to disrupt the distributors. Home Depot and Amazon disruptors are trying to come into B2B distribution and take share from the distributors. Everyone's kind of piling into B2B distribution. So what are the distributors doing? So a month ago, we published some of our initial research. We tracked about 49 tech startup investments and or acquisitions over the past 5 years. Not a great result, frankly, right? There is a silver lining, but I mean, 49 deals, $8 trillion industry, 49 deals, 5 years, mind you. The silver lining is that you can see here, this is from that newsletter a month ago, 16 deals were done in the year of 2021, up from 10. That's an aggregate of both investing and M&A, right? So you got 49 transactions done by 26 distributors, right? There are hundreds of billion-dollar distributors doing over $1 billion in revenue. It's still a relatively small population of distributors partaking in this activity. It needs to be much greater given the current state of affairs in B2B distribution. So we decided to dig even deeper into who's driving this activity. And so what we found was pretty interesting is actually 30 of those deals came from 9 distributors. That means the other 19 deals were done by 17 distributors, right? So you can see kind of a gravitational pull towards these 9 distributors. What was then more interesting is that those 9 distributors fall into roughly two general buckets of B2B distribution. The first bucket is kind of, you could call them more loosely like construction or contractor, kind of building related B2B distributors. Basically, you have building material distributors and HVAC distributors, right? So they're both catering to kind of contractor customers in large part. They're both related to kind of building and construction of some sort, either maintenance or building new construction. So that's one big bucket. And then the other bucket is basically kind of IT and electronics. So IT distributors and then one particular electronic distributor called Avnet, where Avnet's selling to manufacturers of the electronic components. IT distributors are kind of taking the finished products and then selling to the end business. But they're all in that world, let's call it, kind of IT and electronic distribution. So those are basically the main 2 buckets. Those 2 buckets collectively had 9 distributors who accounted for 60% of all tech transactions over the past 5 years. Interesting, right? And so we looked at it even further. You can see here the breakdown between, we had 30 transactions. The majority of those are kind of in the investment realm, right? So taking a minority investment, it's roughly 2/3, 1/3, 60-40 split here roughly between investments to acquisitions. Makes sense, right? It's easier to do more investments and less acquisitions, much kind of greater lift in terms of doing a controlling tech acquisition. Avnet and Ingram Micro and Ferguson Ventures by kind of total deal count really led the charge. Interestingly, Avnet and Ingram both have not done a transaction since 2020. Actually, no one in the kind of IT and electronic distribution space has done a transaction since 2020, except for Tech Data. and they are actually a redistributor. So we actually love the role that these redistributors or two-step distributors have, because they are selling to essentially a distributor who then sells to the end business customer. We worked with Dot Foods and have talked about Dot Foods. Dot Foods actually did 2 tech acquisitions. Dot Foods is also a two-step distributor, but in the food distribution space, right? So when you are kind of a redistributor, you're in a really beautiful place strategically to provide tech tools and services to your distributors that they can then use with their end business customer, right? You can really have a very wide and scalable impact on your industry by enabling essentially your customers, right? With these kind of new digital business model type opportunities. Whereas if you are an actual distributor, you have a little bit more channel conflict when trying to embrace these kind of new disruptive business models. So really like the role of that redistributor model. We also did another video talking about D&H, where they are also kind of going after a marketplace type model, but in a build from scratch model. You can go check out that video as well. We also looked at what was the rationale for these transactions. And you can see our turquoise color here is basically saying the large majority of all these deals were to look at providing tools and products and capabilities to the customer channel. You look at Ferguson Ventures activity is actually all minority investments and all in technologies that would help Ferguson's customers, which are essentially contractors, right? Ferguson's also investing in other VC funds that then invest in tech companies that would help some segment of their kind of customer population. So it's not just Ferguson alone, but really kind of the large majority of all this technology investment is done to say, how do I enable my customer? How can I give them a service or a tool to run their business better? Or to, especially if I'm a redistributor or a two-step distributor, how do I invest in technology that could help the distributor customer then interact better with the end customer, right? So you see that kind of pretty universally across the entire spectrum of these subset of 30 transactions that we've looked at. So we give some examples in our latest newsletter to go deeper into what are some examples of tech investments or tech acquisitions that have enabled that customer channel. So go check out that newsletter for some more detail. And I think the last interesting thing, if you look at another player, which we talk about in this newsletter, is Builders First Source. They weren't a leader by quantity of deals, but in terms of dollars invested, they absolutely would take the lead with their $450 million acquisition of Paradigm last summer, which is doing what? Which is providing software to contractors, right? Throughout various parts of the kind of building process. And then they also did a second acquisition, much smaller though, of basically just an asset purchase of a SoftBank funded company that went belly up. And, I think they got a pretty good deal on that as well, but much smaller in terms of size. But if you look at which B2B distributor just overall has really leaned in and spending dollars in a public way on this theme of kind of new digital business models while also enabling your customer channel with technology, Builders First Source. It's really cool what they've been doing, and we're almost at the 1-year mark, right? So of when they kind of announced the transaction, then it had to close. So we're still early to see what the true impact is and how that integration's gone. We will be sure to track that. Don't you worry. If you like this video, go check out our other videos chronicling kind of B2B distributor, tech investing and acquisitions in the space. Go check out our videos talking about what Dot Foods has done with buying 2 tech companies in their different businesses in food distribution.